The research vessel Aurora's Light tumbled through space like a broken toy, its hull screaming as metal tore against metal. Captain Sarah Chen gripped her command chair as sparks erupted from control panels around the bridge. The ship's artificial gravity had failed 20 minutes ago, and now crew members floated helplessly as emergency lights bathed everything in crimson. Hull breach in sections 4 through 7. Lieutenant Rodriguez shouted over the chaos. Life support failing in the rear compartments. Sarah's mind raced through their options. They were deep in uncharted space, weeks away from the nearest human colony. The alien artifact they'd been studying had somehow triggered a cascade failure in their quantum drive, leaving them stranded in an unknown system with a dying ship. There, Navigator Kim pointed at the main view screen. That planet. It's showing atmospheric readings compatible with human life. The world below looked promising enough. Blue oceans, green land masses, white clouds swirling in recognizable weather patterns. But Sarah knew their approach would be anything but gentle. With main engines offline and only maneuvering thrusters responding, they were essentially a meteor heading for the surface. All hands, prepare for emergency landing, Sarah broadcast throughout the ship. Seal emergency compartments and secure all equipment. This is going to be rough. The Aurora's Light hit the atmosphere like a hammer striking an anvil. The hull glowed white-hot as friction tore away external sensors and communication arrays. Through the view screen, Sarah watched pieces of their ship streak away like falling stars. The ship bucked and rolled, completely out of control now. Mountains rushed up to meet them, covered in dense forests that looked almost familiar. Sarah caught a glimpse of a large clearing between two ridges before the ship plowed into the ground with tremendous force. The impact threw everyone forward, and darkness claimed her consciousness. When Sarah awoke, sunlight streamed through a massive crack in the bridge's view screen. Her head throbbed and she tasted blood. Around her, other crew members were slowly stirring. The ship had come to rest at an angle, nose down in what appeared to be a shallow valley. Sound off? Sarah called weakly. One by one, voices responded from around the bridge. Miraculously, most of her crew seemed to have survived the crash, though several reported injuries. Lieutenant Rodriguez had managed to access the ship's internal sensors. Captain, we've got major problems. The reactor is stable but operating at minimal power. Life support is functioning in only 3 sections of the ship. And, he paused, checking his readings again. We're not alone down here. What do you mean? Rodriguez transferred his sensor data to the main screen. Even damaged, their equipment could detect the electromagnetic signatures of advanced technology scattered across the continent. Cities, power grids, communication networks, all clearly indicating an intelligent civilization. The energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases, Science Officer Park reported. Highly advanced, possibly centuries beyond our current technology. We're looking at a spacefaring civilization, Captain. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. First contact protocols assumed they would be the ones with superior technology, able to communicate from a position of strength. Now they were stranded, barely alive, on someone else's world. As if summoned by her thoughts, a low humming sound filled the air outside the ship. Through the cracked view screen, Sarah saw them approaching, sleek silver vehicles floating silently above the tree line. They moved with impossible grace, defying gravity as easily as birds defied the wind. The vehicles circled the crash site several times before landing in the clearing around the ship. Sarah watched as figures emerged from the craft. They were tall and slender, with elongated limbs and heads that seemed too large for their bodies. Their skin had a faint blue-gray tint, and they wore form-fitting suits that seemed to shimmer in the sunlight. First contact, whispered Navigator Kim. What do we do now, Captain? Sarah straightened her uniform as best she could and checked that her universal translator was still functioning. We survive, she said simply, and we hope they're friendly. The aliens approached the ship cautiously, their movements fluid and precise. Sarah could see them scanning the wreckage with handheld devices that projected holographic displays. Their technology made even the Aurora's Light look primitive by comparison. One of the aliens, distinguished by additional markings on its suit, stepped forward and activated what appeared to be a communication device. A synthesized voice filled the bridge, speaking in perfect English. Crashed beings, we are the Zephyrians of this world. Your vessel has been analyzed. We offer medical assistance and temporary shelter while you await rescue from your people. Sarah activated her own communicator, hoping her words would translate properly. I am Captain Sarah Chen of the human exploration vessel Aurora's Light. We accept your generous offer and thank you for your kindness. The lead Zephyrian tilted its large head. Humans, we have heard of your species from other star travelers. You are new to the galactic community, yes? Still using chemical rockets and metal ships? The comment stung, but Sarah kept her voice diplomatic. We're explorers learning and growing. We appreciate any help you can provide. Of course, our medical facilities will restore your injured. Our replication systems will provide everything you need while repairs are made to your vessel. The alien paused, consulting its device. Though we must inform you, your ship's damage is extensive. It may be some time before it can journey between stars again. As Sarah looked around at her battered crew and their destroyed ship, she realized they might be stranded on this world for months, possibly years. They would be completely dependent on the kindness of beings whose technology made them look like children, playing with sticks and stones. But humans had survived worse odds before, often with far less than what they had now. As the Zephyrians began organizing rescue efforts for her crew, Sarah made a silent promise to herself and her people. They would not just survive on this world, they would prove that human ingenuity and determination were worth something, even in the face of impossible technological superiority. The Zephyrian city of Nexus Prime rose from the landscape like a crystal dream made real. Towering spires of transparent material stretched toward the clouds, connected by bridges of pure energy that flickered with rainbow colors. Captain Sarah Chen pressed her face to the transport window, marveling at the impossible architecture that seemed to defy every law of physics she knew. Their material science is at least 500 years ahead of ours, whispered Dr. Park, the ship's science officer. Those structures should collapse under their own weight, but somehow they're perfectly stable. The Zephyrian escort, who had introduced himself as Counselor Vex, noticed their amazement. Your surprise honors us humans. Nexus Prime has stood for 7,000 rotations of our world. The quantum-stabilized crystalline matrix ensures perfect structural integrity, regardless of environmental stresses. Sarah nodded politely, though she understood perhaps half of what Vex had said. The technology gap between their species was becoming more apparent with every passing moment. The transport itself was a perfect example. It moved without any visible means of propulsion, silent as a whisper and smooth as silk. Their destination was a medical facility that looked more like a work of art than a hospital. Flowing curves and organic shapes dominated the design, with walls that seemed to breathe and shift color based on the activities within. Zephyrian medical staff glided through the corridors on platforms of focused energy, their movements precise and efficient. We will heal your injured first, Vex explained as they entered the main treatment area. Our bioregeneration chambers can repair most forms of damage your species might sustain. Afterward, we will discuss accommodation arrangements while your vessel undergoes assessment. The medical treatment was nothing short of miraculous. Lieutenant Rodriguez, who had suffered a severe concussion and broken ribs in the crash, was placed in a shimmering cylinder filled with golden light. Within minutes, his injuries began healing at a visible rate. Dr. Martinez, whose arm had been nearly severed by falling debris, watched in amazement as tissue regenerated and bones mended themselves. This is impossible, Martinez breathed, flexing her newly healed arm. Cellular regeneration at this speed should cause massive genetic damage, but I feel perfectly normal. Better than normal, actually. Vex's elongated features arranged themselves in what might have been amusement. Your medical science is quite primitive, but not without merit. We studied your crew's biology during the healing process. Remarkably adaptive genome structures, quite resilient for such a young species. The condescension in his tone was subtle but unmistakable. Sarah bit back her first response, reminding herself that they were guests here, completely dependent on Zephyrian generosity. After the medical treatments were complete, Vex led them through the city toward their temporary quarters. The journey provided more glimpses of advanced technology that made Sarah's head spin. Buildings that reconfigured themselves based on occupancy needs, transportation networks that responded to thought commands, citizens who moved through the air as easily as walking on the ground. Your people must be very proud of these achievements, Sarah said, trying to make conversation. Pride is an inefficient emotion, Vex replied. We simply apply logical principles to manipulate matter and energy. These technologies emerged naturally from our understanding of quantum mechanics and multidimensional physics. Standard developments for any mature civilization. The casual dismissal of their miraculous city as standard made Sarah's jaw clench. She was beginning to understand that the Zephyrians viewed humans the way humans might view insects. Interesting, perhaps, but fundamentally inferior. Their quarters turned out to be a luxurious suite that adjusted its internal configuration based on their needs. Furniture materialized from the floor when needed and dissolved back when not in use. The walls displayed whatever scenery they requested, creating perfect illusions of Earth landscapes that made several crew members tearful with homesickness. The replication systems will provide any food or materials you require, Vex explained, gesturing to a panel covered in symbols that shifted and changed as he spoke. Simply think of what you need, and it will be created at the molecular level. Perfect nutrition and composition guaranteed. Dr. Park approached the replication panel with scientific curiosity. Remarkable. You're actually manipulating matter at the quantum level to create complex organic compounds. The energy requirements alone should be negligible, Vex finished. We learned to harness zero-point energy fluctuations millennia ago. Matter creation requires only minor manipulation of vacuum state probabilities, a child's exercise in our educational system. That evening, as the crew gathered in their shared living space, the reality of their situation began to sink in. They were surrounded by technology so advanced it might as well have been magic, completely dependent on beings who clearly considered them little more than curious primitives. I feel like a caveman who's been invited to stay in a modern city, grumbled Chief Engineer Thompson. Everything here makes our most advanced systems look like stone tools. That's exactly how they see us, said Dr. Martinez quietly. Did you notice how Vex talked about our primitive medical science, or how he called our technology development interesting for such a young species? Navigator Kim looked up from the food replicator, where she'd been trying to figure out how to make coffee. At least they're being helpful. They could have just left us to die in the crash, could they? Sarah mused. From what I've seen today, the Zephyrians seem to follow very rigid logical principles. Helping us might just be the most efficient way to deal with the situation. As if to prove her point, Vex appeared in their quarters without warning, his image materializing from the air like a hologram. Humans, we have completed our analysis of your vessel. The damage is more extensive than initially calculated. Sarah stood up quickly. How extensive? Your quantum drive core is irreparably damaged. Your hull integrity has been compromised beyond field repair capabilities. Your communication array has been completely destroyed. Vex paused, consulting a device that appeared in his hand. Conservative estimates suggest a minimum of 4 local years to fabricate replacement components using your technological base. 4 years. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. 4 years stranded on an alien world completely dependent on the charity of beings who considered them barely more evolved than animals. However, Vex continued, our manufacturing capabilities could restore your vessel to full functionality within 30 rotations. We are prepared to offer this service as a gesture of goodwill toward your species. The relief that flooded through Sarah was immediately tempered by suspicion. What would you want in return? Nothing your people cannot easily provide. We are curious about human problem-solving methodologies. Your species' approach to challenges differs significantly from established galactic norms. We would like to observe and document these differences for our xenocultural archives. Sarah exchanged glances with her crew. They were being asked to be specimens in an alien zoo, essentially. But what choice did they have? We appreciate your generous offer, Sarah said carefully. What exactly would this observation entail? Simple tasks, puzzles and challenges designed to showcase your species' unique approaches to problem resolution. Nothing harmful or degrading, merely educational. As Vex's image faded away, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something far more complicated than a simple cultural exchange. But stranded as they were with no other options available, they would have to trust in human adaptability and hope it would be enough. The testing facility looked like something from a fever dream. Crystalline chambers jutted from walls at impossible angles, connected by pathways that seemed to twist through dimensions Sarah couldn't name. Holographic interfaces danced in the air, responding to thoughts rather than touch. At the center of it all sat a massive sphere that pulsed with inner light, its surface covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. Welcome to the Cognitive Analysis Center, announced Dr. Cathera. the Zephyrian scientist assigned to oversee their evaluation. Unlike Counselor Vex, Kithra seemed genuinely excited about the human's presence. We have prepared a series of evaluations designed to showcase your species' problem-solving capabilities. Captain Sarah Chen studied the assembled Zephyrian observers with growing unease. Word had apparently spread throughout the city about the primitive humans and their upcoming tests. Scientists, scholars, and curious citizens filled floating observation platforms that ringed the testing area. She felt like a gladiator about to perform for the entertainment of the masses. The first challenge is quite simple, Kithera continued, gesturing toward a small chamber filled with geometric shapes that shifted and flowed like living things. You must arrange these quantum state objects into a stable configuration that will maintain coherence for more than 60 time units. Dr. Park stepped forward to examine the challenge. The shapes seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously, sometimes solid, sometimes transparent, sometimes appearing to be in several places at once. What are the rules for manipulation? Rules? Kithera's large eyes blinked in confusion. There are no rules beyond the laws of quantum mechanics. Surely your species understands quantum state manipulation? An uncomfortable silence fell over the human crew. Quantum mechanics was still largely theoretical for their species, confined to laboratory experiments and mathematical models. The idea of casually manipulating quantum states was beyond their current capabilities. Perhaps we could start with something more fundamental? Sarah suggested diplomatically. Murmurs rippled through the Zephyrian observers. Sarah caught phrases like, even more primitive than expected, and fascinating cognitive limitations. Her jaw tightened, but she forced herself to remain calm. Kithra made adjustments to the testing chamber and the quantum shapes dissolved away. In their place appeared a collection of simple metal rods, joints, and connectors, crude materials by Zephyrian standards but recognizable to human eyes. Very well. Using these basic components, construct a stable platform capable of supporting twice the mass of your largest crew member at a height of 3 standard units above the floor. Now this was something the humans could work with. Chief Engineer Thompson stepped forward, his eyes already analyzing the available materials. Standard engineering problem. Load-bearing structure, factor of safety, material stress analysis. Thompson, you take point, Sarah ordered. Everyone else, support is needed. What happened next clearly surprised the Zephyrian observers. Instead of one person working alone, the entire human crew collaborated. Thompson began explaining his initial design concepts while Dr. Martinez calculated load distributions. Navigator Kim suggested design modifications based on her experience with ship structural systems. Even the non-engineers contributed ideas and helped with assembly. Fascinating, Kithera murmured to her assistants. They're approaching this as a collective entity, rather than individual problem solvers. The Zephyrians work differently. Sarah had observed their scientists during the journey to the testing facility. Each individual focused solely on their specific area of expertise, communicating only when absolutely necessary. Collaboration seemed limited to formal data sharing rather than the dynamic brainstorming the humans practiced naturally. Within 2 hours, Thompson's team had constructed a robust platform using a triangulated support structure that exceeded the required specifications. The Zephyrian observers seemed genuinely puzzled by the result. The design is inefficient, commented one observer. Too much material usage, excessive redundancy in support elements. But highly robust, Kithera noted thoughtfully. The failure modes have been minimized through deliberate over-engineering. Interesting approach. The second test involved a damaged piece of Zephyrian technology, a small anti-grav unit that had lost its ability to maintain stable lift. The device was a miracle of engineering, its internal components so advanced that the humans couldn't even identify most of them. Repair this device using whatever methods you deem appropriate, Kithera instructed. Dr. Park opened the device casing and peered inside with a magnifying tool. I don't even recognize half these components. The power routing alone uses principles we don't understand. Then we work with what we do know, Sarah said firmly. What can we identify? The crew gathered around the device, each contributing their expertise. Rodriguez identified what appeared to be a control circuit based on familiar logical patterns. Martinez recognized a component that looked similar to a magnetic field generator. Kim spotted what might be a feedback sensor. The problem appears to be here. Thompson pointed to a hairline crack in a crystalline component. This looks like it might be a resonance chamber of some kind. The crack is disrupting the harmonic frequency. How do we fix a crack in an unknown crystal? Park asked. That's when Chief Thompson surprised everyone, including himself. He pulled out a small tube from his emergency kit, standard repair epoxy used for hull patches on their ship. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best solution. The Zephyrian observers watched in horror as Thompson carefully applied the primitive adhesive to their advanced technology. Gasps echoed through the observation platforms as he pressed the crystal back together and held it in place. Barbaric, someone whispered. He's contaminating pure quantum crystal with organic polymers. But when Thompson activated the device, it hummed to life and began floating steadily in the air. The repair held and the anti-grav unit functioned perfectly. The silence that followed was deafening. Dr. Kithara stared at the repaired device as if it had personally offended her. Understanding of the universe, that should not work, she said finally. The molecular interference from your primitive adhesive should disrupt the quantum field entirely. Sometimes different approaches work together in unexpected ways, Sarah replied. Our primitive solution was compatible with your advanced technology. The third test proved even more challenging. The humans were presented with a complex puzzle involving energy patterns that needed to be routed through a maze-like structure. The catch was that the energy patterns were unstable and would decay if not guided quickly enough through the correct pathways. The Zephyrians expected the humans to fail this test completely. The puzzle required rapid analysis of multidimensional energy flows and instant decision-making based on quantum probability calculations. Even young Zephyrians struggled with such challenges, but the humans surprised them again. Instead of trying to solve the puzzle analytically, they treated it like a game. Rodriguez, who had spent countless hours playing strategic video games during long space voyages, recognized the pattern as similar to games he'd mastered. Kim contributed her navigation experience, used to making quick course corrections under pressure. Thompson added his engineering intuition about energy flow patterns. Working together, calling out observations and suggestions, the human team guided the energy patterns through the maze in record time. They didn't understand the underlying physics, but they understood pattern recognition, teamwork, and adaptive problem-solving. The Zephyrian observers fell completely silent. Several were frantically checking their recording equipment as if they couldn't believe what they'd witnessed. Impossible, breathed one scientist. They completed the Nexus labyrinth faster than our graduate-level students. Dr. Kithara turned to face Captain Chen, her expression unreadable. Your species approaches problems in ways we have never encountered. You compensate for individual limitations through collective intelligence, and you apply unconventional solutions that somehow achieve desired results despite violating established methodologies. Sarah sensed opportunity in the scientist's words. Every species develops differently, Doctor. Perhaps our primitive approaches might offer new perspectives on old problems. As they returned to their quarters that evening, the humans couldn't help but notice the changed atmosphere among their Zephyrian hosts. The condescending attitudes had been replaced by something else. Curiosity, perhaps even a hint of respect. But Sarah suspected their real challenges were just beginning. The tests had been simple demonstrations, but she had a feeling the Zephyrians were planning something much more complex. Something that would truly test the limits of human ingenuity and determination. The emergency alarm pierced through Nexus Prime like a scream of tortured metal. Captain Sarah Chen bolted awake in her quarters as red warning lights bathed the Zephyrian city in crimson. Through the transparent walls she could see citizens moving with urgent purpose, their usual graceful gliding replaced by swift, determined flight patterns. Captain, Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice crackled through their communication system. Something's happening in the Central District. The Zephyrians are evacuating entire sectors. Sarah quickly dressed and made her way to the common area where her crew was already gathering. Through the massive viewing wall they could see the source of the chaos. The great central spire of Nexus Prime, a towering monument of crystal and energy that served as the city's primary power distribution hub, was flickering erratically. Bolts of uncontrolled energy arced from its surface, and the entire structure seemed to be vibrating at a frequency that made their bones ache. Counselor Vex materialized in their quarters, his usual composed demeanor replaced by obvious distress. Humans, we require immediate evacuation to emergency shelters. The primary resonance core is experiencing cascade failure. Total system collapse is projected within 6 local hours. What does that mean exactly? Dr. Park asked, though her expression suggested she already feared the answer. The spire regulates all energy distribution throughout the city. Its collapse will result in the destruction of Nexus Prime and the deaths of approximately 4 million citizens. Vex's elongated features showed strain. Our best scientific minds are working on solutions, but the probability of success decreases with each passing moment. Sarah studied the failing spire through the viewing wall. Even from this distance, she could see the complex patterns of energy discharge. What's causing the failure? A resonance cascade triggered by a minor quantum fluctuation in the stabilization matrix. The feedback loop has amplified beyond our ability to compensate using standard protocols. Vex paused, consulting his ever-present data device. We have attempted 17 different solution approaches. All have failed. Can we help? Sarah asked, the words leaving her mouth before she could stop them. Vex's large eyes widened in what might have been surprise or amusement. Help? Captain Chen, this is a crisis requiring our most advanced scientific knowledge. The mathematics alone involve calculations in 17 dimensions. With respect, your species lacks the technological foundation to even understand the basic principles involved. Sarah felt the familiar sting of condescension, but this time something else stirred within her, stubborn determination. Maybe we can't understand your mathematics, but we might see something you're missing. Sometimes an outside perspective helps. Captain, Dr. Martinez spoke quietly. We're talking about the lives of 4 million people. This isn't the time for proving human worth. But Vex was already shaking his head. The emergency protocols do not permit the involvement of unqualified personnel in critical operations. You will be relocated to safety while our experts continue their work. As the Zephyrian's image faded, Sarah made a decision that would either save millions of lives or make her the most hated human in galactic history. We're not going to any shelter, she announced to her crew. Captain? Navigator Kim looked uncertain. Think about it. The Zephyrians have tried 17 solutions using their advanced knowledge and all have failed. They're trapped in their own paradigms, their own way of thinking. But we're not. Sarah moved to the viewing wall, studying the chaotic energy patterns dancing around the spire. We see things differently. We solve problems differently. Chief Engineer Thompson joined her at the wall. What are you thinking, Captain? I'm thinking that sometimes the most advanced solution isn't the right solution. Sometimes you need to approach a problem from a completely different angle. Sarah turned to face her crew. We're going to that spire. The journey through the evacuating city was surreal. Zephyrian citizens streamed past them in organized lines, their technology carrying them swiftly toward designated safe zones. Emergency vehicles darted between the massive structures, their lights painting rainbow patterns against the crystalline buildings. The closer they got to the central spire, the more intense the energy discharges became. The air itself seemed to shimmer and crack, and Sarah felt her hair standing on end from the electrical buildup. Several times they had to take shelter as particularly violent energy bursts swept through the area. This is insane, muttered Dr. Park as they crouched behind an overturned transport. We don't even have proper shielding against these energy levels. The Zephyrians evacuated all their technical personnel, Rodriguez observed. We might be the only ones crazy enough to get this close. When they finally reached the base of the spire, Sarah understood why the Zephyrians were having trouble. The structure was impossibly complex, a fusion of architecture and technology that defied human comprehension. Energy patterns flowed through crystalline conduits in patterns that seemed almost alive, pulsing and shifting with organic rhythm. But there was something else, something the Zephyrians might have missed in their focus on advanced calculations and quantum mechanics. The failure pattern wasn't random. It had a rhythm, a beat that reminded Sarah of something familiar. Thompson, look at the energy discharge patterns, Sarah called over the growing noise. What do you see? The engineer studied the chaotic display for several minutes. It's like a harmonic resonance pattern. The kind of thing we see in vibrating structures when they hit their natural frequency. Exactly. This isn't just a quantum cascade failure. It's a mechanical resonance problem disguised as an energy crisis. Dr. Martinez moved closer to examine the spire's base. Captain, look at this. These crystalline supports, they're vibrating. The whole structure is oscillating at its natural frequency. Sarah felt pieces clicking together in her mind. The Zephyrians are trying to solve this with energy manipulation and quantum calculations. But what if the real problem is much simpler? What if we just need to break the resonance? How do we break the resonance in a structure this massive? Kim asked. Thompson was already studying the support structures, his engineer's mind working through possibilities. We need to change the vibrational frequency. Introduce a counterharmonic that cancels out the destructive resonance. With what equipment? Park demanded. We don't have access to their technology, and our ship's tools are nowhere near powerful enough to affect something this size. That's when Sarah noticed something the evacuating Zephyrians had left behind. Construction, equipment scattered around the spire's base, massive material movers, foundation resonators, and structural adjustment tools designed for building maintenance on the crystal structures. We don't need to understand how their technology works, Sarah realized. We just need to use it differently than they intended. Working with desperate speed, the human crew began repositioning the abandoned construction equipment. Thompson identified the structural resonance points while Martinez and Kim operated the material movers to place the foundation resonators at precise locations around the spire's base. This is completely against protocol, Rodriguez muttered as he helped maneuver a massive resonator into position. We're using construction tools to perform delicate energy work. Sometimes protocol is the problem, Sarah replied, making final adjustments to the resonator array. The Zephyrians think in terms of elegant solutions and precise calculations, but sometimes you just need to hit the problem with a big enough hammer. As the resonators activated, Sarah held her breath. For a moment, nothing seemed to change. The spire continued its violent oscillations, energy still arcing wildly from its surface. Then, gradually, the chaotic patterns began to stabilize. The resonance frequency that had been tearing the structure apart was being countered by the crude but effective harmonics generated by the construction equipment. The wild energy discharges became more controlled, following predictable paths through the crystalline conduits. Within an hour, the great spire of Nexus Prime stood stable and strong once again, its energy patterns flowing in perfect harmony. The city's lights flickered back to full strength, and the evacuation alerts fell silent. Dr. Cathera was among the first Zephyrians to return to the spire, her expression cycling through disbelief, confusion, and something that might have been admiration. How did you know to use harmonic cancellation?
The resonance frequency calculations alone should have required months of analysis. Sarah smiled tiredly.
Sometimes you don't need to calculate the exact frequency. Sometimes you just need to listen to the rhythm and play a different tune. As news of the human success spread throughout the city, Sarah realized that everything had changed. They were no longer primitive specimens to be studied and pitied. They had proven that different didn't mean inferior, and that sometimes the simplest approaches could solve the most complex problems. But she also sensed that their real trials were just beginning. Word of human ingenuity would spread beyond Nexus Prime, and not everyone in the galaxy would view their success as a positive development. The Galactic Council chamber materialized around Captain Sarah Chen like a waking dream. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy filled impossible floating platforms that defied perspective and geometry. Some were recognizable as roughly humanoid, while others challenged the very definition of life itself. Crystalline entities that sang in harmonious tones, gaseous beings that existed as shifting clouds of colored vapor, and mechanical constructs whose thoughts operated faster than biological neurons could process. Sarah stood on a small platform at the center of the vast assembly, acutely aware that she represented not just her crew, but potentially the entire human race. The translation devices provided by the Zephyrians buzzed with countless languages, creating a background hum that reminded her of standing inside a massive beehive. The human called Sarah Chen will present testimony regarding the recent crisis, resolution on Zephyr Prime, announced a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The being speaking appeared to be made of living starlight, its form shifting and pulsing with each word. The attention of thousands of alien minds focused on Sarah like a physical weight. She forced herself to stand straight and speak clearly, knowing that her words might determine humanity's place in the galactic community. Honored council members, 3 cycles ago, my crew and I crash-landed on Zephyr Prime after our exploration vessel suffered catastrophic failure. The Zephyrians provided generous assistance, healing our injured and offering shelter while our ship underwent repair. Murmurs rippled through the assembly, translated into dozens of different communication methods. Sarah caught fragments, clicking sounds from insectoid beings, harmonic resonances from crystalline entities, electromagnetic pulses from mechanical constructs. During our stay, we participated in cognitive evaluations designed to study human problem-solving methods. When the primary resonance core began failing, threatening the destruction of Nexus Prime and its 4 million inhabitants, we requested permission to assist. The records indicate that official Zephyrian response protocols specifically excluded your involvement, interrupted a new voice. This speaker appeared to be some kind of plant-based intelligence, its words accompanied by the rustle of leaves and the scent of growing things. You proceeded without authorization to interfere with critical infrastructure. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The way the question was phrased made their life-saving actions sound like criminal sabotage. That's correct. We acted without authorization because we believed we could help, and time was running out. Using construction equipment in direct violation of established safety protocols, added another voice, this one belonging to a being that looked like a floating geometric shape covered in eyes, techniques that could have easily made the crisis worse instead of better. But they didn't make it worse, Sarah replied firmly. We solved the problem using methods the Zephyrians hadn't considered. Sometimes different approaches succeed where conventional ones fail. This statement triggered an explosion of commentary throughout the chamber. Sarah could see groups of beings engaged in animated discussions, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of sound, light, and electromagnetic radiation. Dr. Kithara's platform rose from the assembly, and the Zephyrian scientist moved gracefully to a position where all could see her. If I may address the council, I have studied the human solution extensively. Their approach was indeed unconventional, but it demonstrated several remarkable characteristics. The chamber fell silent, waiting for her analysis. First, the humans recognized that complex problems sometimes have simple solutions. Instead of pursuing advanced quantum calculations, they identified the fundamental mechanical issue underlying the energy crisis. Second, they demonstrated remarkable adaptability, using available tools in ways never intended by their designers. Third, they approached the problem as a collective unit rather than relying on individual expertise. These traits you describe sound more like primitive survival mechanisms than advanced problem-solving skills, commented a voice from the mechanical section of the assembly. Crude adaptation rather than elegant engineering. Perhaps, Kithara replied. But crude or not, their methods succeeded where our elegant engineering failed. The humans saved 4 million lives using what we considered obsolete construction equipment. Sarah seized the opportunity to speak again. Respectfully, members of the council, I think this highlights an important point. Every species in this chamber has developed incredible technologies and sophisticated ways of thinking. But that sophistication might also be a limitation. A wave of what felt like indignation swept through the assembly. Sarah pressed on before she could lose her nerve. When you've spent thousands of years developing perfect solutions for every problem, it becomes harder to see imperfect solutions that might actually work better. We humans are still new to advanced technology. We're used to making do with whatever we have available, adapting and improvising as we go. You speak as if technological primitiveness is somehow advantageous, observed the plant-based intelligence with obvious disdain. Are you suggesting that ignorance is superior to knowledge? Not ignorance, Sarah replied carefully. Perspective. When the only tool you have is a hammer, you get very good at finding creative ways to use that hammer. When you have every possible tool available, you might forget that sometimes a hammer is exactly what you need. The debate that followed was intense and sometimes heated. Species after species rose to voice their opinions about the human intervention. Some viewed it as an encouraging sign that younger species might contribute to galactic civilization. Others saw it as dangerous precedent that could lead to chaos if primitive species began interfering with advanced technologies they didn't understand. Representative Nexus, a being composed entirely of interwoven energy patterns, finally called for order. The question before this council is not whether the humans acted properly, but what their actions mean for our community going forward. Their success was clearly anomalous, declared a massive creature that looked like a living asteroid. One instance of luck should not influence policy regarding primitive species integration. Was it luck? Kithara asked. I have continued studying human cognitive patterns since the crisis. They consistently approach problems from unexpected angles. Their solutions are often inefficient by our standards, but they work. And they work reliably. This revelation seemed to surprise many council members. Sarah sensed a shift in the chamber's mood, from dismissive condescension to genuine curiosity. The humans demonstrate a problem-solving methodology that our civilization appears to have lost, continued Kythera. They think laterally rather than linearly. They consider possibilities that logical analysis would reject. They combine disparate elements in ways that shouldn't work but somehow do. You're describing chaos theory, observed the geometric eye-covered being. Random chance producing favorable outcomes. No, Kythera replied firmly. I'm describing a different kind of intelligence. One that we might learn from. The implications of this statement rippled through the assembly like a shockwave. The idea that advanced galactic civilizations might learn something from a primitive species challenged fundamental assumptions about technological and social evolution. Representative, Nexus pulsed with brilliant colors as it considered the situation. Dr. Kythera, are you recommending that this council formally acknowledge human problem-solving capabilities as a valuable resource? I am recommending that we not dismiss them as primitive, simply because their methods differ from ours. The humans saved Nexus Prime using techniques we would never have considered. That suggests they might offer solutions to problems we consider unsolvable. Sarah felt her heart racing as she realized the direction this conversation was heading. The council wasn't just deciding whether to punish her crew for their unauthorized actions. They were debating whether humanity deserved a place. Among the advanced civilizations of the galaxy, there are other considerations, interjected a new voice. From a section of the assembly Sarah hadn't noticed before. The speaker appeared to be some kind of crystalline spider, its faceted surface reflecting rainbow patterns.
If humans possess unique problem-solving abilities,
there are factions within the galaxy who would seek to exploit those abilities for less benevolent purposes. A chill settled over the chamber as the implications became clear. Humanity's demonstration of ingenuity hadn't just earned respect, it had also painted a target on their backs. The hegemony has been monitoring this discussion, the crystal spider continued. They have already dispatched reconnaissance vessels toward human space. If this council recognizes humanity as a valuable resource, we may be signing their death warrant. Sarah felt the weight of millions of human lives settling on her shoulders in trying to prove human worth. Had she inadvertently doomed her entire species to slavery or worse? The chamber erupted into urgent discussion as council members debated humanity's fate, while Sarah stood alone at the center, wondering if saving one alien city had condemned her entire homeworld. The war room deep beneath Nexus Prime hummed with desperate energy, as representatives from a dozen species worked frantically to coordinate their response. Holographic displays showed the inexorable advance of hegemony forces toward human space. Massive fleet formations that dwarfed anything Earth's defenses could hope to stop. Captain Sarah, Chen stood before the central tactical display, her crew scattered around the chamber alongside alien military strategists and scientific advisors. 3 days had passed since the Galactic Council's emergency session, and the worst-case scenario was unfolding exactly as predicted. The lead hegemony formation will reach the outer edge of human space in approximately 18 standard hours, reported Commander Zeta-7, a mechanical being whose logical processes operated at superhuman speeds. Earth's defensive capabilities are negligible compared to hegemony military technology. Admiral Vorthak, a reptilian species representative whose scale shifted color with his emotional state, gestured angrily at the display. This is what comes of exposing primitive species to galactic attention before they're ready. The hegemony sees humans as potential tools to be harvested, and Earth as a resource depot to be stripped. Sarah felt the familiar sting of being called primitive, but her anger was overwhelmed by fear for her homeworld. What exactly is the hegemony? No one has explained who we're dealing with. Dr. Kythera approached the display, her elongated features grim. The hegemony represents several species that believe advanced civilizations have the right to exploit less developed ones. They've enslaved dozens of worlds, using conquered populations as forced labor and research subjects. They're particularly interested in unique cognitive capabilities, added Counselor Vex. Human, Problem-solving methods would be invaluable for their military engineering projects. They would likely keep your brightest minds as prisoners while using the rest of your population for manual labor. The tactical display updated with new information, showing the hegemony fleet adjusting course toward Earth's solar system. Sarah watched the inexorable approach of ships that could probably destroy her entire world without breaking formation. Can the Council intervene militarily? She asked, though she already suspected the answer. Admiral Vorthak's scales darkened to deep purple. The Galactic Council maintains neutrality in conflicts involving non-member species. Officially, we cannot take military action to protect humanity. Unofficially, Sarah pressed. Unofficially, several of us are very concerned about the precedent this sets, Vorthak replied carefully. If the hegemony succeeds in enslaving humanity, what stops them from targeting other species with unique capabilities? Commander Zeta-7's optical sensors focused on Sarah with mechanical precision. There is one potential solution, though it carries significant risks. The Council could grant humanity emergency membership status, which would trigger mutual defense obligations. What's the catch? Sarah asked, though she was already dreading the answer. Emergency membership requires demonstrating that your species possesses capabilities essential to galactic security, Cathera explained. You would need to solve a problem that our combined civilizations have been unable to address. Sarah felt her stomach drop. Let me guess, you have such a problem? The holographic display shifted to show a different region of space, where strange geometric patterns disrupted the normal flow of stellar radiation. At the center of the disturbance sat something that hurt to look at directly. A structure that seemed to exist in too many dimensions at once. The Nexus anomaly, Vorthak said grimly. It appeared 3 years ago and has been growing steadily larger. Our best scientists believe it represents some kind of trans-dimensional incursion that could eventually destabilize local space-time. We've tried every conventional approach, added Commander Zeta-7. Quantum manipulation, dimensional mathematics, exotic matter bombardment. Nothing has had any effect. The anomaly continues expanding at a rate of approximately 3% per standard time unit. Sarah studied the impossible structure, noting how it seemed to shift and flow even in the static holographic display. What happens if it keeps growing? Conservative estimates suggest that within 50 years, the space-time distortions will render this entire star cluster uninhabitable, Cathara replied. Billions of lives across dozens of worlds would be lost. The weight of the situation settled on Sarah's shoulders like a physical burden. Humanity was facing enslavement or extinction from the hegemony, and their only hope was to solve a problem that had stumped the galaxy's greatest minds. It seemed impossible. I need to see it directly, she said finally, and I need my entire crew with me. Admiral Vorthak's scales shifted to orange stripes. Captain, the anomaly's proximity effects can be dangerous to biological minds. The transdimensional emanations have driven several research teams to madness. Then we'll take precautions. But I can't solve something I can't properly examine. Sarah turned to face the assembled alien representatives. My people think differently than yours. Maybe that difference will let us see something you've missed. And if you fail? Asked Vorthak. Sarah met his reptilian gaze steadily. Then humanity faces the hegemony with the knowledge that we tried everything possible. But I'm not ready to give up yet. The journey to the Nexus anomaly took 6 hours aboard a Zephyrian research vessel, equipped with the best protective systems available. As they approached the disturbance, Sarah began to understand why previous research teams had been affected so severely. The anomaly didn't just exist in normal space, it seemed to extend into dimensions that human perception wasn't equipped to process. Looking at it directly caused disorientation and nausea, as if her brain was trying to comprehend something fundamentally incompatible with reality. The trans-dimensional emanations are increasing, reported Dr. Park, monitoring her instruments with obvious strain. I'm reading energy patterns that shouldn't be possible according to any physics I understand. Chief Engineer Thompson was studying the anomaly through heavily filtered displays that reduced its visual impact. Captain, this reminds me of something. The way it's structured, the dimensional overlaps, it's like a machine that's been assembled wrong. What do you mean? Sarah asked, fighting off another wave of disorientation. Look at how the different dimensional layers interact. They're not aligned properly. It's like someone tried to build something complex but got the assembly instructions mixed up. Dr. Martinez joined Thompson at the displays, her medical training helping her notice details the others might miss. He's right. This doesn't look like a natural phenomenon. The patterns are too regular, too structured. Someone or something built this. Navigator Kim was working with the ship's sensors to map the anomaly's spatial distortions. Captain, I'm detecting what might be control nodes at specific points within the structure. If Thompson's right about this being a machine, those could be the equivalent of command interfaces. Sarah felt a familiar sensation, pieces of a puzzle clicking together in her mind. What if this isn't an invasion or an accident? What if it's a construction project that went wrong? The idea seemed to energize her crew. Lieutenant Rodriguez pulled up historical data on transdimensional research. There are records of several ancient civilizations attempting to build transdimensional gateways. Most of the projects ended in disaster because they tried to force dimensional barriers that weren't meant to be bridged. Thompson added excitedly, but what if the structure could be modified? What if instead of trying to destroy it, we tried to fix it? Dr. Cathara, who had been monitoring their discussion, looked skeptical. Captain, the energy levels involved are beyond anything your species has encountered. Even if your theory is correct, the technical requirements for dimensional engineering are staggering. Maybe, Sarah replied, but we don't need to understand the advanced physics. We just need to figure out how the pieces are supposed to fit together. As her crew began developing their unconventional approach to the Nexus anomaly, Sarah couldn't help but think about the hegemony forces closing in on Earth. Billions of human lives hung in the balance, dependent on whether a group of stranded explorers could succeed where the galaxy's greatest minds had failed. But for the first time since learning about the threat to her homeworld, Sarah felt a spark of hope. Her crew had already proven that human ingenuity could solve impossible problems. Now they just had to do it one more time, on a scale that would determine the fate of two species and potentially the stability of local spacetime itself. The Nexus anomaly pulsed with malevolent energy as Captain Sarah Chen's team approached in their heavily shielded work pods. Through the filtered displays, the trans-dimensional structure looked like a cosmic puzzle box that had been assembled by a mad god. Layers of reality, twisted and folded into configurations that made her eyes water to contemplate. Hegemony forces have entered the outer solar system. Dr. Kithara's voice crackled through the communication system. Earth's defensive fleets are moving to intercept, but they won't last long against hegemony technology. Sarah forced herself to focus on the task at hand. Somewhere in the twisted geometries ahead lay the solution that could save both her homeworld and countless alien civilizations. Thompson, talk to me about those control nodes Kim identified. I'm reading 17 distinct interface points distributed throughout the structure, the engineer replied, his voice tight with concentration. They're connected by what looks like a command network, but the signal pathways are all scrambled. It's like someone took the wiring diagram for a complex machine and fed it through a blender. Navigator Kim was working to map the dimensional distortions around each node. The spatial warping is worse near the central interfaces. Whatever this thing was supposed to do originally, those are probably the primary control systems. Dr. Martinez had been studying the anomaly's effects on local spacetime. Captain, I think I understand what happened here. This was meant to be some kind of trans-dimensional gateway, but the builders made a critical error in the alignment calculations. Instead of opening a stable portal, they created a dimensional feedback loop that's been growing more unstable over time. Can we shut it down? Sarah asked. Not shut down, Thompson corrected. Fix it. The structure is still fundamentally sound, but the control systems are trying to execute conflicting commands. If we can realign the command pathways and reset the primary parameters, we might be able to complete the original construction. Dr. Park looked up from her sensor readings with alarm. Complete it? Thompson, we have no idea what this thing was supposed to do. What if fixing it makes the situation worse? It can't get much worse, Lieutenant Rodriguez pointed out grimly. The anomaly is already destabilizing local spacetime. At least if we fix it properly, it might become stable. Sarah made the decision that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. We're going to try it. Thompson, which nodes do we need to access first? The work was unlike anything the crew had ever attempted. Each control node existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that human perception couldn't fully process. Interacting with them required a combination of technical skill and intuitive leap-taking that would have been impossible for a more logical species. I'm getting readings from Node 7. Kim reported as she worked with what appeared to be a crystalline interface covered in symbols that shifted and changed as she watched. The command pathways are definitely scrambled, but there's an underlying pattern. It's like a song that's being played with all the notes in the wrong order. Musical metaphors might actually be helpful here, Dr. Martinez added from her position at Node 12. The dimensional harmonics do seem to follow patterns similar to musical scales. What if we try to tune the nodes to work together, instead of fighting each other? Thompson's engineering background proved invaluable as he worked to trace the corrupted command pathways. I think I see the problem. The builders used a distributed control system, but they didn't account for dimensional drift over time. The nodes have been slowly falling out of synchronization with each other. So we need to get them all back in sync, Sarah concluded. How do we do that without understanding the underlying physics? The same way a musician tunes an instrument without understanding acoustics, Rodriguez suggested. We listen to the harmony and adjust until it sounds right. It was the most unscientific approach imaginable, but it was also perfectly human. Instead of trying to calculate the precise mathematical relationships between dimensional frequencies, they relied on pattern recognition and intuitive adjustments. Working together across 17 different nodes, the crew began the delicate process of retuning the nexus anomaly. Kim used her navigation experience to identify reference points in the dimensional matrix. Thompson applied his engineering knowledge to trace signal pathways through impossible geometries. Martinez contributed her medical training to recognize healthy versus diseased patterns in the energy flows. Node 15 is responding, Park called out excitedly. The dimensional distortions are stabilizing in this sector. Node 3 is coming online too, added Rodriguez. The command pathways are starting to align properly. As more nodes fell into synchronization, the anomaly began to change. The chaotic energy discharges became more ordered, following predictable patterns through the crystalline structures. The space-time distortions that had been expanding uncontrollably started to stabilize and even contract slightly. Captain, Dr. Cathara's voice carried barely contained amazement. The dimensional readings are stabilizing across the entire structure. Whatever you're doing, it's working. Sarah allowed herself a moment of hope before returning to the task at hand. Keep working, everyone. We're not finished until all 17 nodes are properly synchronized. The final adjustments required splitting their attention between multiple dimensions simultaneously. A task that would have driven most logical minds to madness, but somehow felt natural to the human crew. They worked by instinct and intuition, making adjustments that felt right rather than following calculated procedures. When the last node fell into proper alignment, the transformation was spectacular. The Nexus anomaly's chaotic form resolved into something beautiful and purposeful, a crystalline gateway that seemed to exist in perfect harmony with local spacetime. Energy flowed through it in elegant patterns that no longer threatened dimensional stability. Incredible, breathed Commander Zeta-7 over the communication link. The dimensional distortions have completely stabilized. The threat to local spacetime has been eliminated, but the real surprise came when the gateway activated. Instead of opening a portal to some unknown dimension, it projected a holographic message in dozens of languages, including several that were familiar to the galactic observers. To those who complete our work, the message began, we offer this gift in gratitude. The Nexus Gateway provides instantaneous travel between any 2 points in the galaxy, powered by the harmonic resonance of dimensional frequencies. May it serve to unite civilizations in peace and understanding. The implications were staggering. The ancient builders had created a faster-than-light transportation system that could revolutionize galactic civilization. And humanity had just proven their worth by succeeding where countless advanced species had failed. Captain Chen, Admiral Vorthak's voice carried new respect. The Galactic Council votes unanimously to grant humanity full membership status, effective immediately. The Mutual Defense Clause is now in effect. The response was swift and decisive. Council fleets materialized around the hegemony forces approaching Earth, their combined firepower vastly superior to anything the slavers could bring to bear. Faced with overwhelming opposition, the hegemony vessels retreated without firing a shot. As Sarah watched the enemy fleet disappear into hyperspace, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment. Humanity had not only earned their place among the stars but had also contributed something genuinely valuable to galactic civilization. "So what now, Captain?" asked Thompson as their work pods docked with the research vessel. Sarah looked back at the Nexus gateway, its crystalline structure pulsing with gentle light as it waited to carry travelers between the stars. "Now we go home, Chief. We've got a lot of people to tell about humanity's new place in the galaxy." Dr. Cathera appeared on the communication screen, her elongated features showing something that might have been a smile. "Captain, the Council has also voted to designate your crew as the official human representatives for Gateway operations. Congratulations, you're about to become the busiest people in known space." As their ship turned toward Earth, Sarah couldn't help but smile. They had started this journey as stranded explorers, dependent on alien charity for their very survival. They were returning as the newest members of galactic civilization, having proven that human ingenuity and determination were forces to be reckoned with among the stars. The primitive species had just changed the galaxy forever, using nothing but teamwork, intuition, and the uniquely human ability to find solutions where others saw only problems. And this, Sarah realized, was probably just the beginning of humanity's impact on the wider universe.